Let's hear now from our sisters in faith, beloved children of God. First Darlene, and then Monica.
So I'm about to tell you the story of my life journey, and it is by no means typical for transgender folks. In fact, there's no such thing as a typical transgender person, and there's not a typical gay, lesbian, or bisexual person either. If you have met one of us, then you only know one of us. And I'm also going to tell you some things about my personal life and spirituality, which I'm not able to share with my immediate family. And some of the things I'm about to say might make some of you in here uncomfortable. However, just remember that everyone in here is part of a privileged few to whom I am willing to open up. I had a happy childhood. My mom and dad provided me with a stable home life, and I had plenty of friends growing up. I was raised in rural northeastern Georgia near Gainesville. I had no clue at all, no feelings on the inside that I should have been a girl. I enjoyed all the boy activities. I especially enjoyed outdoor activities like fishing and boating and camping and hiking. Even so, in elementary school, I still had difficulty fitting in with the other boys because they liked competitive sports and rough and tumble fighting and wrestling. I just somehow wasn't quite boyish enough for them. And I had a grandfather who told me that I was too gentle and too sensitive for a boy. Well, his words to me went in one ear and out the other. Much to my credit, I was a stubborn little urchin. I didn't feel like there was anything at all wrong with me. Yet during my mid-teens in high school, that was when I started to feel different on the inside. I became quieter and more reserved, even though I felt some romantic attraction to girls. I had very little physical interest in sex. I don't know if it was my ambiguous gender or my socially conservative upbringing in rural northeastern Georgia that caused my developmental delays. I'll probably never know. I was slow to develop in other ways as well, like in muscle mass and athletic skill, and even hit my growth spurt about a year later than the other boys. However, in spite of all this, I had lots of friends in high school. Between band, track and field, and Boy Scouts, I was quite well connected. And even though I had been raised in the church since birth, or actually several churches, Baptist and Methodist, it was during my mid-teens that I committed to living for Christ every hour of every day. For example, it was during my teenage years that I read all the way through the whole Bible. But then, after high school, I immediately started attending North Georgia University. I lost contact with many of my friends and social connections that I had from high school, and I had trouble making new connections in college. The world had become a much more complicated place. I discovered my passion for science. As a consequence, I felt alienated and excluded from most of the churches in northern Georgia, which pushed creationism. I began to feel somehow incomplete on the inside and conflicted on the inside. I started developing bouts of severe depression. In spite of it all, I graduated from college with a degree in biology and a degree in math. And I went out west to look for work in hopes of either finding my career or finding myself. I did lots of part-time and temporary jobs in wildlife conservation in Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, Alaska, and Montana. Through my travels, I felt increasingly socially and spiritually lost. I longed for female companionship, and I felt increasingly alienated from the seemingly mechanical God of Christianity that I had been raised with. Yet as I worked in these wild places, I began to feel increasingly surrounded by a female energy. While I am still discerning whether this divine feminine is some spirit which embodies all of nature, or is just simply my own personal spirit guide, whichever is the case, it was during this time in my mid to late 20s that I began to write hymns and write prayers to my mother goddess. Fast forward to my second and third years in my PhD studies at Georgia Tech. This is only 8 years ago. I felt this external divine feminine energy starting to flood from the outside into inside of me. I became convinced that my change from male to female was the will of my mother goddess. In 2009, I became Darlene Wagner, and I have lived as female ever since. Also in 2009, I met my life partner, Monica, and I'm making her blush. Yet despite my experiences with the divine feminine, it has taken me several years to really understand that my transgender life and my faith in the mother goddess are a packaged deal. I can't have one without the other. I can't be open about one and not be open about the other. So I no longer struggle with a sense of lostness, but I do have some struggles with the feeling that I'm somehow of the untouchable, lowest caste in Christianity. But thanks to all of you here, thanks to pilgrimage, I no longer feel completely marginalized. I do not feel like no more harm or hurt is being done in this community. So in a nutshell, as I crossed from male to female, I began to stop experiencing the divine spirit as a stern father figure, and I began to experience the divine as a compassionate, gentle mother instead. Now this is not an easy thing for me to try to reconcile my faith experiences with Christian teaching. I'm not sure if they can really be reconciled. However, I do hope and pray that all communities of faith now in the 21st century can expand beyond traditional written doctrines to encompass multiple faith experiences, multiple personal faith experiences. So who all of you in here believes that God is too big to fit into one religion? Yeah, this is not a rhetorical question. I would hope all of you. So just think for a minute, how many people live on Earth? How many do we have on Earth? What's the current population of Earth?
7 billion.
Yeah. What if humanity is too big to fit into only one God?